Hey everyone, welcome along to the Transplant Strong Podcast. Today I'm joined by Karen. Karen is a liver transplant patient, and since having her transplant, she's got quite involved in the medical research world. So this is going to be very interesting. Hi Karen, how are you?
Hi, Danny. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very, very good, thank you. So tell us a bit about your transplant and what led you to having a liver transplant.
Okay, I was diagnosed with two autoimmune conditions way back, a long time, and uh, they were manageable to start off with. And first of all, I had one autoimmune hepatitis, and then they decided I had lap over with PSC, so two. And then at the time, I lived in the Midlands and I relocated to London. So I was put in the care of King's. And when I got to King's, they changed my medication because they felt they needed to. And they also discovered that I was celiac. So I added another condition to my list. And that was back in 2004. And then I did okay for a while, and we were relocated again to Somerset. And I was just getting annual ultrasound scans and just 6 monthly chats with people, and everything was going really well. But in 2010, I had my routine ultrasound, and they spotted the tiniest little difference between the one I'd had before and the one that they'd just done. So they referred me for a MRI. And surprisingly, I got that call for the MRI the next day, and I was back up in London 2 days later. So I started to get a little bit nervous. And then the MRI spotted that I had a tumour, and I was called back in. They didn't tell me at the time, but again, I got another phone call. They'd come back in 2 days later, so I knew there was some bad news going on. And yeah, they told me I had cancer, but it was in the sixth segment, which, if you know anything about a liver, it's the little tiny bit at the end,
Yeah.
but it was right underneath a rib, and it really wasn't operable. So I had to. I didn't really have much option but to be listed for transplant. And so I was really lucky that I got invited for assessment the following week. And then I was put live on the transplant list. And at the time, DCD liver, so that's by circulatory death, was still in its infancy in liver transplants. The waiting list at the time was about 18 months for a DBD, DBD, yeah, DBD, and I couldn't wait that long because of the cancer, and so they put me. They said the only option for me at that time was a DCD liver, and it was a very short list of people. But in fact, I then had to come off the list and have some chemotherapy on my tumour, and then after a couple of weeks back on the list, that then didn't work. So I was back off the list for more chemotherapy, then back on the list again. And it took 6 months before I got my final call. I had 8 calls in all,
Wow.
up to Lings at King's, and getting all prepped and ready, off and in a gown and everything before they'd say it wasn't going to go ahead. So it was a really traumatic up and down sort of 6 months before I finally got my ninth chance, and I got that liver. And luckily for me, everything went really well. I was home again in 2 weeks, which at the time was really good. I mean, no, they've got a lot better at it now, haven't they? People get
Yeah.
home sooner, but back in the day, 2 weeks was regarded as a really good turnaround. And yeah, that was me back home and recovering.
So, I mean, 2 weeks is very, very fast for somebody that had been through so much as well. I mean, your body had been through chemo,
Yeah.
you've been through a lot. So to get out in 2 weeks, I still think it's a very, very fast time, to be honest. It's very good. What?
Yeah, I think I felt very lucky, but I also, I mean, part of my journey, I was always a very fit, healthy person.
Yeah.
Even when I had the autoimmune conditions, I always kept doing sport and cycling and walking. So I carried on doing that the best I could, although I was getting sicker and sicker, and I was getting a lot of fatigue, as you will know. Um, with liver disease, fatigue is a big part of that.
Mm.
So I used to crash and burn, and then get up and do lots of things and
Yeah.
crash and burn, and that was that was the way I handled it. But I did remain relatively physically fit, although I'd lost a lot of weight, and I think that probably put me in really good stead for facing the transplant.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the number one sort of top bits of advice, isn't it, for anyone that's pre-transplant, is just to try and stay as active as you can pre-transplant, just
Absolutely.
because it helps immensely after.
Mm, mm.
So with the cancer, do you think that that would have been detected if you weren't having these tests?
No, and not until it was a lot bigger, and it was a fast-growing tumor, which is why the first. So I had a process called TACE, which is where they inject the chemo right into the tumor,
Yeah,
and then they seal it all off, so there's no blood supply, and the chemo is sort of contained in that area of the liver to try and shrink it. And the first lot didn't really work. The second lot, it did work a bit, but by the time I had my transplant, the tumor was quite big again. So,
yeah,
I mean, they did say at the time that it was pretty much, goodness, we're so glad we got it out when we did, because we don't think you'd have had much longer.
yeah.
So, I feel very blessed that's how it was. It took a lot out of me, the chemo. I was quite sick with it, and I lost all my hair.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a challenge. But of course, it's a bit like having a baby. Sort of, I've forgotten how terrible it was.
Yeah.
I've moved on, fortunately.
Yeah, I think as traumatic as these things are, we kind of do sometimes forget. And then we sometimes, and I know for a fact I have, you sort of take your health for granted again, and then something happens and you're like, oh, shit, got to look after myself.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, I'm a big advocate for keeping well physically as well as mentally. And well, it's an aside really, but 6 weeks after my transplant, I had a heart attack,
Right.
which was actually caused by another rare disease. And I'm really lucky, because if I'd have had it before my transplant, I never would have got the transplant, so I'd be dead now.
Yeah,
Whereas I had it 6 weeks after, so again, I was blessed. And at the time, King's was saying, no, she can't possibly have had a heart attack, because we checked her heart before a transplant, and she has a really good, really healthy heart. And
yeah,
the guys down in Somerset were saying, absolutely no, she's had a heart attack. We've had to put a stent in. And it was another rare disease, which I've sort of learnt a lot more about since, but was oblivious to at the time.
so you're
But
really no stranger to hospitals.
no, no, I mean, I went through a lot in that period of my life, but I gradually, I mean, what I tell you, what the saver was, I went to cardiac rehab
Yeah,
because of the heart attack, and that's what got me exercising again. Because by then I was terrified to do anything,
yeah,
because when you've got that great big abdominal sort of surgery thing going on, and you're never really sure what to be exercises be doing and what have you. But because I went to cardiac rehab, and they were very good with me, although they were a bit scared of me because of the transplant bit, they were very good in terms of setting me off on easy exercises and gradually building up. And that's what got me out and about again. And when I finished the cardiac rehab, I started swimming, and that's when I joined King's transplant team and started swimming in the
yeah.
British Transplant Games.
Yeah, I've talked about the transplant game so much on this podcast, and it's something that I'd love to mention because it's one of the best things that I've ever done. And having that as a goal, like you don't have to be the fittest person, but having that as a goal is a really good thing to keep you going throughout the year, to keep the training going, to keep you motivated, keep you active, and then it comes around to the games where you get to meet all these great people, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. And what I love about it is it's so inclusive. You
Yeah,
don't, I mean, people do win medals, but that doesn't actually matter. That's not the main focus of being there. The main focus of going there is to show that got yourself better, you're getting fit again, you're enjoying life, you meet, as you say, all these absolutely fabulous people from all over the country, and they're a really great group to know because they understand what you've been through. You know, your mates and your family, there's only so much they can understand about what you've been through with a transplant, whereas they all get it. They know, they've been there themselves, and so you can talk about things you can't really talk about with your friends,
Yeah.
and you can share stories about your medication
Yeah.
and about the trials and tribulations of recovering and what have you. And you feel in a safe place, and I think that's equally as important as actually it gives you this challenge to get yourself fit again and do something, get out and do something. And not everything is like very sporty. You know, you've got the bowling and you've got the darts and things. So it's,
Yeah.
there's something for everybody, and I think that's also really important.
Yeah.
It's a great, I love it.
Archery is something that I want to have a go at this year, I think.
Yeah, and they're really good because they run the beginners classes for
Yeah.
everybody to learn, which I think is fabulous.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
great, not those archers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's move on to the medical research side of things. So how did you get involved in that, and what sort of projects have you been working with or on?
Okay. Okay. So um, when I was listed for my transplant, a research doctor came to see me and he said, when you've had your transplant, can we have your old liver for research?
Yeah.
And I said, by all means, I don't want it anymore. You can have it. I said, but I'd really love to hear what you do with it. And bless him, I was probably, I don't know, about 7, 8 days after my transplant, he came back to see me.
Yeah.
And he told me what had happened with my liver and how many different research groups had benefited from it because they did a lot of they did sort of little took samples and they had good looks at it with the MRI and stuff in Kings and used it for their purposes. But then they chopped it up. Well, he said sliced it. Sounded more civilized than it. Sliced it up, and they sent bits to different researchers that were looking at specific things. So they were either looking at the autoimmune conditions or they were looking at the cancer, and looking at the impact of chemo on the rest of my liver. That's so there were lots of different people that eventually that benefited from my liver, which actually it just made me feel so good because I thought, at least it's making some difference, which is
Yeah.
really wonderful. And so that got me thinking that I really wanted to know more about the research because obviously when you've had a transplant, you get given all these medications and you're sort of thinking, well, do I really want to be putting all this stuff into my body? But you have to because of you don't want to reject it. And I wanted to know more about that and I wanted to live my best life. And I wanted and I'm curious. It's always like, why
Yeah.
am you giving me this? And I started to learn from the support groups that different medications were given to different people, and I wanted to know why. And so I started to look out for opportunities to get involved with researchers. And back then, so I had my transplant in 2010, and that was still very much, I would say, the early years of patient public involvement in research. And so I managed to get involved in a couple of little things where they would give you the patient information leaflet and they would say, does this make sense to you? And you'd make some comments about it was still a bit too technical or, it perhaps could have been worded a bit differently for patients, that sort of thing, and fed that back. And then NHSBT started what they called a patient public advisory group. And so I joined that. And that was to support the researchers that do work with NHSBT. And also there was a sort of a movement across all of the research about involving patients more in the work that they did, so that it wasn't that you were doing research at people, you were actually involving them in it.
Yeah.
And so there's two sides to it. So you can actually be a participant in a study, and you fill out a survey or you give some blood or you might even trial a new drug, that sort of thing. But on the other side, in order to design the research in a meaningful way, it's a good idea to involve people with lived experience because they
Yeah.
are the experts. They are the experts in their disease, or they're the experts in what it's like to have a transplant or whatever. And so that's really developed over the 15 years that I've, since I had my transplant. And it was really good because you'd get researchers that would want to know if what they were thinking about planning as a research project, whether that was really going to be patient benefit, whether
Yeah.
that was something we thought would be really useful or not. And then these days we have research is funded mainly by the government through the National Institute of Health Research, or smaller studies through the universities. And funders now expect you to actually involve patients throughout the study. So not only do you talk to the beginning about what the research should be, where it should focus, you involve them in the design of the research, you involve them in the patient-facing information about the research, or designing the survey or whatever it happens to be. And then you can also involve them in things like the trial management committee that meets on a regular basis to see how the research is going. And if, for instance, they're not recruiting well, they would perhaps ask the patients, why aren't we recruiting? Why don't people want to be part of our research? What can we do to help people understand and want to be part of it? That sort of thing. And then, the last part of that, of course, is they've finished the research, they've got these findings, that's wonderful. And in the past, that would just be shared with academics in papers and in conferences. And patients never got to hear about that. Whereas now, the feeling is that patients should be involved in what they call the dissemination, the sharing of the information. And that's really important too. And in fact, the law has just changed. And so from April, every researcher is obliged to report back to every participant in their study the results, what they found out, what they learnt from it, what was right, what was wrong, and what they're going to do next. And I think that is such a fantastic thing because, I talked to lots of people over the years and they've said, well, I was in that study, but I never heard anything.
Yeah.
Never heard anything. I don't know what happened. I don't know what results there were. And it was a, real big frustration for a lot of people. So I think that is really brilliant that they've now changed the rules about clinical trials. It is so it's only where you're actually involving patients in an activity, like it could be a trial that involves giving blood or samples, or it could be you trying out a new medication or a new intervention. But I think it will broaden out to other things as well, the more quantitative research like surveys and focus groups and what
Yeah.
have you. And it's going to make a really difference because I think it empowers patients. If patients know what's happening in research, then that helps them to form questions to ask when they go to clinic.
Yeah.
It either helps to reassure them because they can see there's lots of information and lots of research going on about, say, medication, and how to improve it so that you don't develop side effects. Or it might be that they're developing new ways to use more organs so that people don't have to wait so long on the waiting list. Because, as you know, Danny, there's a lot of people on the waiting list, and there's not enough organs for
Yeah.
everybody, and sadly people do die waiting.
Yeah.
And obviously that is a big aim, is to actually change that. And so it's a real privilege as a patient if you can be involved in those sort of studies
Yeah.
that are making a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been involved in a couple. I tried, there was a dispenser, an injection dispenser, I think it was Wilson's disease medication. And we had to go along and you look at the device and you try it out and then you gave them the feedback on how easy it is to handle. If you've got tremors, can you do this? Can you
Yeah,
do that?
yeah.
And the other one that I did was I had all of my blood pumped out of my body, and they took I think it was the white blood cells out, and they were using them for a research project. And from what I remember, it was something to do with you can put it into a transplant patient, and this is very specific transplant patients. I don't think I qualified, but my blood would work. And it helps to deal with the rejection process, so then you don't have to take the medication. But again, like I don't know what happened with that. So
Oh
like
well,
you say, it would be nice to hear back and find out
yeah.
how far it had progressed, if it was something that they were going to use in the future.
Oh well, if you can think of any details about that, I can go and find out.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the biggest project that I've been involved in recently is actually developing plain language summaries of research that's been published,
yeah,
and they're published on a website, so they're all in one place where people can find them. Because one of the biggest issues for patients was that they never knew where to look for the research,
yeah,
and when they found it, they couldn't understand it because it was written for an academic audience.
yeah,
So we've been rewriting these plain language summaries in a way that even a 12-year-old could understand. And we've put them in one place on it's called the UK Organ Donation and Transplantation Research Network. And so people can go there and have a look. And then we also invite researchers to come and talk about their work. And so people can attend a webinar and ask questions, or they can watch the webinars that already happened. And it's about closing that loop. So it's been making research transparent, but it's also closing that loop of knowledge so that patients know what's going on. And so if they're then approached about some other research, then they're more likely to want to be involved because they trust the researchers. They know they can get involved in these things. It's a really good thing to do.
yeah. It's very beneficial, and like you say, I mean, I have so much praise for doctors. They've saved my life, nurses, everyone like that. But there is a sometimes this sort of big disparity between understanding the needs of a transplant patient or a chronically ill person, and then what the doctor thinks should be happening.
Mm.
And yeah, and to be able to relay the two is very important. And it's important as well that I've learned through other people's stories is to be able to advocate for yourself as well and to have that knowledge,
Absolutely.
to
Mm.
be able to, because just from my experience with Wilson's disease, I was taken to the doctors multiple times. I mean, we probably would have never have guessed either, but I know people that have Wilson's disease. They went to the doctors. They said, "I think I've got Wilson's disease," and one of the quotes was, "Don't be ridiculous. It's so rare you can't have it."
Yeah.
So, it's important that we can advocate for ourselves and find these things early.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And there's so many exciting things happening in the UK in terms of research that's trials that are currently in progress. And I think it's really important that we hear about those as well. So we
Yeah,
don't just wait until the research is finished and it's published, which is like years away. It's good to know what's happening right now because, again, it gives you lots of a sense of hope, and it also gives you encouragement that they're always looking for new solutions, and I think that's really good. We are very strong in research in organ donation transplantation in the UK, and but I think they just don't talk about it enough. So
yeah.
that's sort of where I've got involved, and I'm all the time talking about the research.
Yeah, King's College is definitely the hospital to be at as well for that because I remember just having so many different doctors come and look at me because I had such a rare case, and obviously loads of people were trained there. They do
Mm.
lots of research. It's a great place, King's.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. But in fact, that's pretty much going on everywhere. And all seven liver units in the UK do a lot of collaborative work, especially at the moment with perfusion machines, which is, they weren't around when I had my transplant, but they're making a big difference to the way that transplants are done now, because they can actually not just look after the organ between retrieval and transplantation, but they can also start to treat them with the sort of things that might have made a transplant perhaps more difficult, or perhaps somebody might have rejected. So things like inflammation, for instance, they can treat that because as soon as the organ is retrieved, it's starting to develop inflammation. They can
Yeah,
treat that so that by the time it's transplanted, it's in a better condition, which obviously means it's more likely to work, which is a
yeah,
fantastic thing.
yeah, yeah. That's incredible. That's really, really good. The future is hopefully bright for a lot of us. And I know many transplant patients worry about the medication because of the so many side
Yeah.
effects. But talking to you and through some of the things I know, hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be on something a bit safer.
Absolutely. And for some people, they'll be able to come off it completely. There's lots of studies going on at the moment. So, certain diseases, um, like autoimmune conditions, will always need to have medication because
Yeah,
quite a lot of us had the medication before we even had our
yeah,
transplant. But there's other reasons why people ended up with a transplant, across all of the different organs, where they can possibly potentially not need to take that medication forever. So there's
yeah,
lots of work going on there, which is really exciting too.
yeah. That's really, really good.
Yeah.
So this year, are you heading to the Transplant Games?
I am, yes, I'm going to the British, but I'm also going to the European
Oh,
in Holland. Yeah.
yeah. I'm not going to be able to make the Europeans, but I'm hoping to go to the British this year. So I've got it in the diary. So
Good.
yes,
It's in Sheffield, which will be very nice. They did very well when they ran it in 2000 and when was it? I think it was my first one. That's why I remember it so fondly.
yeah,
Yeah, it'll be good to get back there again. And I know they're going to run a really good games.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And for anyone watching, it is a fantastic experience. I think you should all just come and see what's going on, even if you don't want to compete.
Absolutely.
Just
Absolutely, I think that's right. Come and watch the first one yourself and just see, and I guarantee you'll be so enthused you'll want to come back and do it yourself.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you very much, Karen. It's been very interesting talking to you.
Oh, it's lovely. Thank you for inviting me. I
Yeah,
love to get
and
on my soapbox about research.
yeah, well, anything that you sort of feel like we could benefit from, please let me know and I will share. If you need any researchers, I'll share it on my page. I'm happy to help with what I can
Thank
as
you.
well, if I have the time.
Brilliant.
So, yes, that'd be really, really good. Just got this.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you, and I'll speak to you very soon.
Okay, that's lovely. Thanks, Danny.
And for anyone watching, please, if you like this episode, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps with the algorithm and everything like that. And, we want as many people to find this channel as possible. So, yeah, please subscribe and check out the Transplant Strong website for merchandise. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.